The white light of erasure, the absolute terrified scream of the Omni King's power, did not fade into nothingness. Instead, it shattered. It broke against a wall of platinum scales like glass striking a mountain, scattering into harmless sparks that drifted through the void. For the first time since the dawn of existence, the decree of the Omni King was denied. Goku stood amidst the fading particles of divine destruction, his chest heaving not from exhaustion, but from the sheer density of the power flowing through his veins. He was no longer a Saiyan, no longer a mortal martial artist seeking a thrill. He was a monolith of ancient, forgotten authority. His eyes, vertical slits of burning crimson set within irises of molten gold, looked down at the two small, trembling figures floating before him. The Grand Priest was gone, erased by the dragon's claw. The hierarchy was severed. The silence that followed was heavier than a galaxy collapsing, a silence that signaled the death of the old world and the violent birth of the new. Before the throne of creation changes hands and the laws of the cosmos are rewritten by the will of the dragon, mark your alliance with this new timeline, subscribe, and witness the ascension of the king. The white light of erasure did not simply fade, it died. It was strangled by a presence that defied the fundamental logic of the multiverse. The blinding brilliance that had once wiped out 6 universes in a fit of tantrum now dissolved into harmless, drifting snowflakes of energy, cold and inert. In the center of that dying storm stood the impossibility. Goku was no longer breathing in the ragged, desperate gasps of a mortal warrior pushing past his limits. His breath was a slow, rhythmic tide, a deep resonance that vibrated through the fabric of the void itself. The Platinum Dragon King form was not merely a transformation of power, it was a transmutation of being. His skin was sheathed in fine, interlocking scales of iridescent platinum that caught the non-existent light of the void and fractured it into a spectrum of colors never seen by mortal eyes. His hair, once the wild, jet-black mane of a Saiyan or the golden flame of a Super Saiyan, had settled into a flowing liquid silver mane that drifted behind him as if suspended in deep water. But it was his eyes that heralded the end of the age. The warm, naive, circular pupils of Son Goku were gone. In their place sat vertical, predatory slits of crimson burning within pools of molten gold. The eyes of Zalama, the creator, the eyes of a beast that predated the concept of angels. Floating 100 meters away, the 2 Omni Kings, the Zenos, hovered in paralyzed silence. Their small, oval heads were tilted, their expressions frozen in a grotesque mask of confusion. They looked at their hands, tiny, childlike hands that had held the power to delete existence with a clench of a fist. They looked at Goku. Then, they looked back at their hands. "It didn't work," the present Zeno whispered, his voice trembling, stripped of its usual playful echo. "Why didn't it work?" the future Zeno asked, his tone pitching higher, bordering on the shrill panic of a child who realizes the locked door will not open. "We said erase. We said disappear. Why is he still there?" Goku did not answer immediately. He took a step. The simple action of his foot pressing against the nothingness sent a shockwave through the realm of void. It wasn't a shockwave of wind or force, but of weight. The entire dimension groaned under the density of his existence. With the death of the Grand Priest, the structural integrity of the angel realm had begun to unravel, but Goku's presence was holding it together by sheer gravitational force. He was becoming the center of gravity for the cosmos. "Your era is over," Goku said. His voice was a tectonic rumble, layering the familiar cadence of the Saiyan raised on Earth with the ancient, metallic reverb of the Dragon God. It was a voice that did not ask for permission to be heard. It simply overwrote the silence. The Zenos flinched, drifting backward instinctively. For eons, they had been surrounded by attendants, guards, and the great priest who cushioned their every whim. Now, the priest was scattered dust, his divine halo shattered by the Omega Dragon Fist, and the guards were long since obliterated. There was no one left to shield them from the consequences of their own creation. "You are bad," Present Zeno shouted, pointing a finger. "You broke the priest. You're not playing by the rules. Go away." "Erase!" Future Zeno screamed, thrusting both hands forward. "Erase! Erase! Erase!" A beam of pure white-violet light, concentrated and desperate, erupted from the Omni Kings. It was a chaotic, unrefined torrent of destruction energy, enough to wipe out a timeline. It screamed across the void, tearing apart the remaining pillars of the arena, aiming directly for Goku's heart. Goku did not dodge. He did not raise a guard. He did not flare his aura. He simply exhaled. A plume of platinum mist escaped his lips. The dragon breath. It wasn't fire. It was the physical manifestation of absolute authority. The mist collided with the erasure beam, and didn't just block it, it ate it. The Zenos light was consumed, digested, and neutralized by the ancient supremacy of the dragon god's magic. The mist continued forward, washing over the two small gods. The Zenos shrieked, covering their faces, expecting pain. But there was no pain, only the sensation of their divinity being stripped away, layer by layer. The mist cleared, and Goku stood directly before them, towering like a mountain of judgment. The platinum scales on his chest glowed with a terrifying rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat of the dragon god. He reached out. His hand, now a clawed gauntlet of dragon armor, cast a long shadow over the two rulers of the multiverse. "The universe is not a toy box," Goku spoke, his vertical pupils narrowing as he looked down at the beings who had treated mortal lives like disposable game pieces. "And I am no longer your entertainment." The present Zeno looked up, tears forming in the corners of his eyes, not tears of sadness, but the primal tears of a prey animal realizing it has been cornered by the apex predator. The concept of God was crumbling. The playground was closed. Goku's claw closed around the empty space between them, and the reality of the void began to twist. The air around Goku's clawed hand didn't just bend, it crystallized. The raw nothingness of the void compacted, pressurized by the sheer density of his ki until it formed a translucent geometric shape, a tesseract of shimmering platinum energy. The Zenos scrambled backward, their tiny limbs flailing in the zero-gravity expanse. "Guards! Attendants!" Present Zeno wailed, his voice cracking into a sob. "Where is everyone? Why is it so quiet?" "There is no one left to hear you," Goku answered, his voice devoid of malice but filled with a crushing finality. He didn't enjoy this. The old Goku, the one who loved the thrill of the spar, might have felt a flicker of pity for these childlike entities, but the Platinum Dragon King saw only the equation of balance. These beings were chaos incarnate. They erased universes because a number was too uneven or because a game was too boring. That whim could no longer be allowed to govern the fate of trillions. Goku flicked his wrist. The tesseract expanded, shooting forward faster than light. It wasn't an attack, it was a confinement. The platinum cage enveloped the two Omni Kings before they could summon another erasure blast. Clang! The sound was not of metal on metal, but of reality snapping shut. The Zenos slammed their fists against the transparent walls of the cube. "Let us out!" Future Zeno screamed, his face pressed against the energy barrier, his voice muffled and distant. "We are the kings! We are the all! You cannot put us in a box!" Goku drifted closer, his silver mane floating ethereally behind him. He brought his face level with the prison. The vertical slits of his eyes bored into them, silencing their tantrums. "You were never kings," Goku said softly, the truth of his words echoing in the minds of every surviving being in the vicinity. "You were children with a loaded gun, and now the gun has been taken away." He raised a single finger. The cube began to shrink. It compressed, folding space-time in on itself until the two Omni Kings were no larger than action figures trapped inside a glowing die. Their screams faded into a tinny, insignificant buzz, then silence. Goku caught the cube in his palm. It felt heavy, not with mass, but with the weight of the timelines they had destroyed. He looked at it for a long moment, a swirl of conflicting emotions passing behind his dragon eyes. He remembered the Tournament of Power. He remembered the erasure of Universe 9, the despair on the faces of the fighters. He remembered the callous laughter that had accompanied the end of worlds. "Sleep," he whispered to the cube. "Sleep until you learn the value of what you broke." With a thought, he banished the cube into a sub-dimension within his own shadow, a pocket of non-time where the Zenos would remain, suspended, stripped of influence, until the end of this era. The deed was done. The absolute power of the multiverse had been dethroned. But the silence that followed was not peaceful. It was a vacuum waiting to be filled. A ripple disturbed the stillness of the void. It was soft at first, like a stone dropped in a pond, but it grew rapidly into a tidal wave of celestial pressure. Goku turned his head slowly, his platinum scales chiming softly with the movement. From the far reaches of the shattered arena, lights began to appear, one by one, then in clusters, soft, pale blue lights. Halos. The angels. They had arrived. The death of the Grand Priest had severed their connection to the central hierarchy, leaving them in a state of autonomic shock. But their programming, their instinct to seek the center of authority, had drawn them here. They materialized in a perfect circle around Goku, Whis, Vados, Korn, Kus, Mojito, all 12 of the angelic guides. Usually they were beings of detached amusement, observers who stood above the fray. Now their faces were pale, their staffs held in defensive postures. They looked at the empty space where the Grand Priest had stood. They looked at the spot where the Zenos had been, and then 12 pairs of pale violet eyes locked onto Goku. Whis was the first to speak. His voice was steady, but the usual lilt of playfulness was entirely gone. He looked at the being who had once been his student, the Saiyan he had bribed with food, the mortal he had taught to move without thinking. "Goku-san?" Whis asked, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. Goku did not power down. He could not. The dragon form was not a cloak he wore. It was now his skin. He floated upward, rising until he was physically looking down upon the circle of angels. "Goku is part of this," the Dragon King replied, his voice resonating from everywhere at once. "But the student you knew died when the priest tried to erase him." Vados stepped forward, her staff glowing with a dangerous light. "You have slain our father," she said, her tone sharp, vibrating with a rare, cold anger. "You have imprisoned the Omni Kings. You have shattered the cosmic law. Do you expect us to simply stand by and watch the multiverse fall into anarchy?" "I expect you to see the truth, Vados," Goku countered, his gaze shifting to her. There was no hostility in his eyes, only an abyssal calm. "The law was broken long before I arrived. A law that allows the erasure of trillions for the amusement of 2 children is not a law. It is a crime." He spread his arms, the 12 wings of platinum energy, ethereal and majestic, unfurling from his back. The sheer pressure of his aura pushed the angels back a step. "I do not seek to destroy the universes," Goku declared, his voice rising, commanding the void. "I seek to rule them, to protect them from the whims of chaos." The Grand Priest chose his side. He chose stagnation. He chose death. Goku looked at Whis, a flicker of the old camaraderie sparking in the dragon's gaze. "Now, you must choose yours. The throne is empty. Will you serve the memory of a broken system, or will you serve the order that replaces it?" The tension was palpable, a wire pulled to its snapping point. The angels exchanged glances. They were beings of logic, of neutrality. But the murder of their father was a violation of their core existence. Mojito, the angel of Universe 9, snarled, his halo flaring bright red. "This is blasphemy," Mojito shouted. "We are the children of the High Priest. We do not bow to a mortal no matter what scales he wears." Mojito lunged. It was a blur of movement faster than instant transmission. The angel's staff aimed directly for Goku's throat, a strike meant to decapitate. Goku didn't move his body. He only moved his tail. The platinum tail whipped around with the speed of a cracking whip. intercepting the staff. Crack! The sound was like a thunderclap. The angel's divine staff, forged from the oldest materials in creation, shattered into splinters. Before Mojito could register the loss of his weapon, Goku's hand was around his throat. Goku lifted the angel effortlessly, dangling him like a rag doll. Mojito kicked and clawed, unleashing torrents of destruction energy, but the blasts washed over Goku's platinum skin like water over a stone. "I am not immortal," Goku said, leaning in close, his dragon breath hot against the angel's face, "and you are no longer untouchable." He tossed Mojito aside. The angel crashed into the floating debris of the arena, sliding to a halt at Whis's feet, gasping for air, his halo flickering and dimming. Silence returned to the circle. The message was delivered. The hierarchy hadn't just changed, it had been rewritten. Goku descended slowly, landing in the center of the circle. He did not raise his fists. He simply stood, the Platinum Dragon King, waiting. "Kneel," he said. The word was not a shout, it was a decree. The command hung in the vacuum, heavy and absolute. Kneel. For an angel, the act of kneeling was not foreign. They had spent eons kneeling before the Zenos. But that was submission to a function, to a universal constant. Kneeling before a being that had once been mortal, a being whose lifespan was a flicker of a candle compared to their eternal suns, was a violation of every instinct written into their divine code. The silence stretched, agonizing and thin. Whis looked down at Mojito, who was still gasping on the invisible floor of the void, clutching his bruised throat. The hierarchy of power was not a debate, it was a mathematical fact. The Grand Priest was the strongest entity in existence, and he was dead. Goku, this new Platinum Dragon King, had executed him with a single strike. Logic, the cold current that ran through every angel's blood, dictated only one conclusion. Neutrality could only be maintained if there was an authority to serve. Without a king, an angel is nothing but a wanderer. Whis closed his eyes. He thought of the sushi on Earth. He thought of the sparring matches on Beerus's planet. He thought of the foolish, smiling Saiyan who would scratch the back of his head and laugh in the face of death. He mourned that Saiyan for a fraction of a second, burying the memory deep within his staff. Then Whis opened his eyes. They were clear, void of sentiment. "The law of angels is to serve the supreme authority," Whis stated, his voice carrying clearly to his siblings. "The authority has shifted." Whis lowered his staff. The tip touched the ground with a soft chime. Slowly, with the grace of a falling leaf, the angel of Universe 7 bent his knee. He bowed his head, his white hair falling forward to veil his face. "I acknowledge the new order," Whis said. A ripple of shock went through the others. Vados stared at her brother, her lips parted in disbelief. "Whis, do you truly—" "Look at him, sister," Whis whispered, not raising his head. "Look at his eyes. Zeno is gone. Father is gone. There is only the dragon." Vados looked back at Goku. The Dragon King had not moved. He watched them with a patience that was terrifying because it felt infinite. He wasn't demanding their worship for his ego, he was demanding it for the stability of reality. Without their submission, the administration of the cosmos would collapse into chaos. He was holding the roof of the world up with his will, and he needed them to be the pillars. Vados sighed, a sound like a galaxy exhaling. She lowered her staff. She knelt beside her brother. "I acknowledge the new order." One by one, the dominoes of divinity fell. Korn, Kuss, Margarita, each angel realizing the futility of resistance, lowered themselves. The halos hovering around their necks, which usually pulsed with a steady blue light, began to change. As they pledged their allegiance to the dragon god, the blue deepened, shifting into a shimmering metallic silver, the color of their new master. All 12 angels knelt in a perfect circle around Goku. Goku looked around at the bowed heads. He felt no triumph, only the settling of a great weight. The machinery of the multiverse was back under control. "Rise," Goku said, "and we have work to do." The summons was not sent via a messenger. It was projected directly into the souls of the gods. Across the 12 universes, On planets of destruction and sacred worlds of the Kais, a voice spoke from the sky. It was not a request. It was a gravitational pull, dragging the consciousness of every supreme Kai and god of destruction to the center of all things. Come to the palace. In a flash of warping light they arrived. The Grand Assembly Arena, once a place of tournament fighting, had been transformed. The shattered tiles had reformed into a vast, polished floor of obsidian. In the center, where the Zenos' throne had once sat, a new seat existed. It was massive, carved from the crystallized energy of the Super Dragon Balls, glowing with an inner amber light. Beerus materialized, stumbling slightly as he arrived. He looked around wildly. Champa was there, shaking. Belmod looked pale behind his clown makeup. The Supreme Kais were huddled together, clutching their Patara earrings. "Where is the Grand Priest?" Shin whispered, his voice trembling. I felt the Grand Priest's energy vanish. "Quiet!" Beerus hissed, his ears flattened against his skull. "Look!" They looked up. Sitting on the amber throne was a figure that radiated a pressure so intense it made the air taste like metal. Goku sat with one leg crossed over the other, his elbow resting on the armrest, his chin propped on his fist. The 12 angels stood behind him in a semicircle, their staffs held upright, their eyes fixed forward, unblinking. But it was the angels' halos that terrified Beerus the most. They were silver. "Goku?" Beerus breathed, the word escaping him before he could stop it. The figure on the throne shifted, the vertical pupils locked onto the god of destruction. "That name belongs to a mortal who died fighting your battles," the Dragon King said. "But you may use it, Beerus, for old time's sake." The casualness of the statement sent a chill down Beerus's spine. This wasn't the Goku who begged for a sparring match. This was a being who had looked into the abyss and eaten it. "The Omni Kings have been relieved of their duties," Goku announced to the gathered pantheon. His voice was amplified, booming across the obsidian expanse. "The Grand Priest has been executed for treason against the balance of life." Gasps erupted from the Kais. Belmod stepped forward, sweat beading on his forehead. "Executed? The Grand Priest? You killed him?" "I removed an obstacle," Goku corrected, "and now I am removing the uncertainty." He stood up. The movement was fluid, liquid power rising. "For too long, the multiverse has lived in fear of a child's mood swing. You destroyed planets because you feared if your mortal level was too low, you would be erased. You ruled through terror, not purpose." Goku walked down the steps of the throne, approaching the line of gods. He stopped in front of Sidra, the destroyer of Universe 9. Sidra flinched, remembering how his universe had been erased first in the tournament. "There will be no more random erasures," Goku declared. "The universes will not be judged by a number on a chart. They will be judged by the quality of life they foster." He turned to look at all of them. "The Dragon's Law is simple. You are no longer destroyers of the weak. You are pruners of the wicked. If a civilization seeks to enslave others, you end it. If a planet is a cancer to its galaxy, you excise it. But if you destroy a world simply because you are lazy or angry or bored," Goku's aura flared just for a second. A flash of red-black dragon flame that scorched the obsidian floor. The pressure brought every god of destruction to their knees, forcing them down not by command, but by the sheer biological need to survive the gravity. "Then I will destroy you," Goku finished. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a new hierarchy cementing itself into the bedrock of reality. Beerus looked up from the floor, sweat stinging his eyes. He saw the face of his former rival, the Saiyan he had once dismissed as a prodigy but ultimately a mortal. He realized now that he had been wrong. Goku hadn't just surpassed him, he had transcended the game entirely. "Do you accept this law?" Goku asked. "We accept." The shout came from Champa, desperate and loud. "We accept the Dragon's Law." "We accept," Shin added, bowing low. "We accept," Beerus whispered, his pride finally breaking under the weight of the platinum aura. Goku watched them for a moment. He didn't smile. He turned his back and walked up the steps to the throne. He sat down, the dragon wings folding around him like a cloak of starlight. "Then go," the Dragon King commanded, Return to your universes, and do not make me look in your direction." The gods scrambled, tapping their staffs, warping away in flashes of desperate light. Within seconds, the arena was empty, save for the king and his 12 angels. Goku let out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders dropping just an inch. He looked at the empty void above him, where the stars of the super dragon had once floated. He had won. He had established peace. He had ensured safety. But as he sat there, in the absolute quiet of the highest dimension, he realized that the throne was cold, and the view, while magnificent, was terribly, terribly empty. The transition of power was swift. With the new decree etched into the celestial fabric, the 12 universes fell into a rhythm of terrified efficiency. The wars that had plagued the mortal realms for eons began to sputter and die out, suffocated by the knowledge that a single omniscient gaze was watching from the void. Tyrants who once burned galaxies for sport looked up at the night sky and felt a chill in their bones, a primal warning that the old rules of chaos no longer applied. Peace had arrived, but it was a peace forged in iron, cooled in silence. In the palace of all, time had lost its meaning. There was no day or night, only the eternal silver luminescence of the angels and the amber glow of the dragon throne. Goku sat alone. The angels had retreated to the periphery, standing like marble statues at the 12 pillars of the palace, ever vigilant, ever obedient. They spoke only when spoken to. They moved only to serve. The banter, the lessons, the shared meals, all of it had evaporated with the Grand Priest's death. To them, Goku was no longer a being to be understood. He was a force to be facilitated. Goku rested his chin on his clawed hand, his eyes scanning the holographic projections floating before him. He saw Universe 7. He saw Earth. He saw Gohan sitting in his study, surrounded by books, a look of profound relief on his face as he read a report that the Frieza Force remnants had disbanded. He saw Vegeta standing on a cliff edge, staring up at the sky, his arms crossed, his face a mask of complicated frustration. Vegeta knew. He couldn't sense Goku's ki. It was too divine, too distant, but he felt the absence. He felt the shift in the cosmic wind. The Prince of Saiyans knew that Kakarot had gone somewhere he could never follow. Goku's finger twitched, hovering over the image of Chi-Chi and Goten. They were eating dinner. There was an empty chair at the table. It had been empty for a long time, but they had kept it there, waiting. He wanted to go back. The urge was a physical ache in his chest, a burning coal beneath the dragon scales. He wanted to farm radishes. He wanted to fight Vegeta in the wastelands. He wanted to eat a meal that tasted like something other than divine ambrosia. But he looked at his hand. The platinum scales shimmered. The claws were sharp, lethal instruments of governance. If he returned, the balance would break. The Zenos were only contained by his active will. The angels were only submissive to his superior power. The moment he showed weakness, the moment he became Goku the Saiyan again, the sharks would circle. The void would open. The chaos would return. He had traded his life for their safety. It was the ultimate exchange. "Wishin," Goku said softly. The angel appeared instantly at the foot of the throne, bowing low. "My lord, is the food on Earth still good?" Whis paused. For a fleeting second, the mask of the servant slipped, and a flicker of sadness passed through his pale eyes. He remembered the instant ramen. He remembered the joy of discovery. "It is delicious, my lord," Whis replied quietly. "Bulma-san held a party yesterday. There was pudding." "Pudding?" Goku repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "That sounds nice. Shall I bring you some?" Goku looked at the hologram of Earth one last time. He saw his friends laughing. They were safe. They were growing old. They were living the lives he had fought to protect. "No," Goku said, waving his hand. The hologram dissolved into mist. It wouldn't taste the same. He sat back, the ancient weight of the Dragon King settling onto his shoulders. The solitude was absolute. It was cold up here, at the peak of existence. The air was thin, and the silence was loud. But as he closed his eyes, drifting into the meditation that maintained the prison of the Omni Kings, Goku felt a tremor, not from within but from without. Far beyond the boundaries of the 12 universes, beyond the reach of the angels, deep in the darkest scar of the multiverse where even the Omni King's light had never touched, something stirred. It was a vibration of pure malice, a frequency of anti-life. Goku's eyes snapped open. The vertical slits dilated. The platinum aura flared around him, not in calmness, but in warning. He looked into the darkness between the pillars of the palace. The shadows seemed to lengthen, twisting into shapes that shouldn't exist. "Whis," Goku commanded, his voice hardening into the steel of a general. "Prepare the defenses." "My lord," Whis asked, sensing the shift in his master's energy. "What do you see?" Goku stared into the abyss. He felt a gaze staring back, a gaze that felt ancient, familiar, and terrifyingly powerful. A gaze that belonged to a history erased by Zeno eons ago. "The peace is over," Goku whispered, the red glow of his eyes illuminating the darkness. "The void is waking up." The Platinum Dragon King stood up, his 12 wings unfurling to their full span, casting a shadow over the throne he had just claimed. The new era had begun, but the war for eternity was just arriving.